The best investments you could ever make if you want to do drop trailers versus having to do manual yard checks is make sure that you're choosing a really good trailer tracking and telematics provider that has a really robust system that can provide that type of stuff in real time versus, again, those manual yard checks that you're having to have a driver go get eyes on the load, see if it's empty, etc. Those different sensor suites and all that come into play when you're talking. Of the nearly 500 employees we have, about 100 are admin, and really we run 400 tractors with about 30 dispatchers.
Hey, Freight People. Welcome back to another episode of the Freight People podcast. I'm your host, Ava Barnes, and today we've got a special guest, Cole Stevens, Chief Strategy Officer at Stevens Trucking. They started with one Hotshot pickup in 1979, and now they operate about 400 trucks and over 1,900 trailers. They are a top 10 employer in Oklahoma, hyper-focused on drop and hook, tech adoption, and a family-first culture. Let's dive in. Cole, welcome. Can you take us back to the beginning? Your dad, Kenny Stevens, started with one truck, hauling freight straight out of the oil fields. What drove him? And what is fueling Stevens Trucking today?
Thanks for having me, Ava. I appreciate it. Yeah. My father, Kenny, like you said, started the business back in 1979. He was a hotshot guy. As he told it, he was the long-haired hippie kid in the Oklahoma oil field. He likes to joke when he bought that first pickup truck that, he hauled more in the floorboard of the pickup truck than he ever did on the flatbed of it. He just kind of had to grind it out at 19 years old and, get out and hustle and do the hot shot stuff, taking, drill bits and all the things in the Oklahoma oil patch, and just slowly worked up to being able to afford to buy a semi truck. And then fast forward into the late 90s, oil got down to about $8 a barrel, which for the oil field sector, that's no good. And, he decided because of the cheaper fuel to diversify into the dry van truckload space. So in the late 90s, that's whenever he, pivoted a little bit away from the flatbed side. We still stick to some of that core and do some flatbed work, but the vast majority of our business now is in that dry van truckload drop and hook sector. And we've just taken kind of that hot shotters mentality of just-in-time delivery, making sure, every shipment's important and that it's on time into the, the truckload space, and trying to kind of keep the way he started the business. That's the core concept of, how we do the truckload, which is kind of funny because when I started my career about 10 years ago in the family business, I'm the youngest of three brothers. Every one of us is in the business. The hotshot stuff was down to the minute. And back then, probably 2015, general dry van truckload, a lot of the time it was just if you got there on the day, that was okay, right? That was kind of considered on time as long as you call ahead. But with modern technology and the pull forward of e-commerce and all those different things, now everyone sees everything and they want it down to the minute. So I feel like it really, it prefaced with the groundwork of that hotshotter mentality and how my father started the company, that, that's who we are to our core. So we've been successful, kind of through the COVID era, just with that mentality.
Yeah. And how did you find your spot at Stevens Trucking? Did you try a couple of different roles?
Goodness, you would ask that, Ava. So I was in college, and I was I was an athlete in college. I was playing a sport at the University of Oklahoma here, and I ended up, graduating and having my first child very young, needing to find a job. And so at the time, we were getting ready to kind of go into that ELD mandate, kind of the mid 2010s. And so, coming out of that and needing to provide for a child and all those things, I started actually doing oil field sales when we were probably 50-50 about 10 years ago, doing flatbed sales, going to oil rigs, wearing the steel toes and the FRs for going to see the rig sites and different things. Just started out as a sales guy working at about 4 o'clock in the morning, headed out to oil rigs or machine shops, and, just kind of grinding it out, delivering donuts and food and doing whatever it takes to, try to drum up some flatbed business, and then kind of worked into that sales manager role, then became, director of sales, and then kind of worked my way up into the C-suite over a 10-year period. Us brothers like to joke that our father's probably the hardest on us, and he's always been that way. I think that's a great lesson. We're very blessed to have him as a leader and a father, but he also has never handed anything to us. And that really started at a young age in things like sports. He always made sure that he would tell us, hey, you've got to be head and shoulders better than the competition if I'm going to play you, if he was coaching the sport that we played. And he was the same way. My oldest brother, Chad's been here almost 25 years. He started out in the detail bay detailing trucks. My older brother, Eric's been here 13 or 14 years. He started out as a recruiter hammering the phones. So there was not this, hey, you walk into the family business and you just are going to get to be the general manager or something like that. And he wanted us to learn it from the ground up, because a lot of the people that you grow with in your career also started maybe in a lower role. And so, when you develop those relationships, especially somewhere as kind of small town as Oklahoma, you really develop great relationships with those people that, maybe were sweeping the floor at a machine shop, and now they're the person calling the truck. And then 5 years down the road, they're the plant manager, right? And he always taught us that you treat everyone the same, because genuinely throughout his career, starting at 19 years old, he's seen people go from legitimately being the janitor into running, the entire companies. He's got lots of incredible stories throughout his career where he's seen that. And so he's like, look, you never know where someone's life's going to lead them. And you treat them with respect, and it always comes back around full circle. And so that's kind of how I got led into the business. Was I finished college and finished playing ball and jumped right in the family business at the lowest level, and just kind of over 10 years have worked my way up. And we do this trucking thing now.
That's awesome. Yeah, it sounds like you guys learned quite the work ethic from your dad. Are there any sisters in the family, just brothers?
So I've got a sister-in-law, and then my father's sister-in-law is in the business. Our wives hang out together. We actually live on like the exact same compound with each other. So it's very tight knit, which is kind of funny because that's all I've ever known. But some people, when you tell them that, they're like, really? That you guys really get along like that? I'm like, yeah, that's all I've ever known. Right. We stick together, we work together, vacation together. Everything's kind of built around the core part of the business. And his sister-in-law and my sister-in-law combined, between 6 members of the family, we have about 150 years in the business collectively. And we're still learning every day. He jokes, I think it'll be 46 years in just under a month. And he always says that we're a 46-year-old startup, right? We're just trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Well, we've got to, keep our learning caps on these days, because technology is changing so rapidly.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of us, the beginner mind is helping. And yeah, you mentioned like the janitors that stick around and kind of move up through the business. And it sounds like you guys have created like an awesome workplace culture, recognized top 10 workplace in Oklahoma. What's behind that award? Like, do you have any insight on how you keep drivers and staff engaged, loyal, motivated?
Yeah. I mean, it's Dad's leadership, right? That's who he is through and through. He doesn't put on a face for anyone. You get what you get with him, but I think people really appreciate just how genuine he is. We call him the wizard. He's like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. He's just like always here, always listening, and just like so involved. Unless we're on a family vacation, he sees every single driver. He speaks to every single orientation class that comes through here every single week at the corporate headquarters. And he's very hands-on because, again, he started it from the ground up. He still holds his CDL. When he first started, he was so young. It was a commercial chauffeur's license back then because he was under 21. And then when some of the regulations changed for it to actually become a CDL, so I think it's been like 42 years, he still holds his CDL, so he can go talk to the drivers about driving a truck, and he knows what they've been going through. And so when we make business decisions, he's genuinely making those business decisions on behalf of the driver, because that's still him at heart, even though, he's not out there actually delivering the freight. That's how he's always thinking. And so, I'd say he's the secret weapon. He holds the secret recipe, the KFC recipe to how we do things. It really is. It boils down to having him. He's awesome.
So he like set the tone for really respecting the drivers and the staff and thinking about their perspective and, what would be best for them. That sounds awesome.
Absolutely. There's sometimes where we'll make a mistake operationally and he's like, I wouldn't drive for us. And he's like, if I wouldn't drive for us over this thing, you know what I mean? Then how can you expect someone else to? And like he puts it in such realistic terms because like it can be, right? It can get away from you, the speed at which our world is moving. Sometimes it's all the technology and the things that make you forget that it's still a person and that person, has a family and they want to get home safe to each other. It puts that human element in perspective that you want to take care of them the way that you would want to be taken care of if you worked anywhere else and you chose to work somewhere else. And also too, if you were a customer somewhere, how would you want to be treated, right? If our trucks don't show up on time, how does that feel whenever you get, stiffed by a plumber or someone, that's supposed to come fix your air conditioning unit, right? How does that feel when you don't call ahead of time and say, hey, we're running a little bit behind? So all those like little details, he just obsesses over. I mean, a lot of the same thing. He's a little more old school, but a lot of the things that you hear, the Jeff Bezoses of the world, the Elon Musks, when it comes to business and obsessing over, customers and things, like that is him through and through because he understands our whole family's out of a job if we don't have the people both on the external customer side and the internal employment side rowing the boat. Because again, the six of us in the family, we can't do it without the other 500 employees. Like it wouldn't be what it is without them. I know that sometimes sounds corny, but like genuinely, if you don't have good people, you don't have a good company.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they build the company, are the company even.
Yes, yeah,
And
100%.
y'all have like mostly drop and hook model, and I'm wondering if that impacts driver experience or staff experience also.
Yeah, it definitely drives asset utilization to the trucks to help with like hours of service and things where you're not worrying as much about like detention, but there's pros and cons to everything, right? With that can come the asset management piece. So that's a lot different of an animal, I would say, than one truck, one driver, one trailer that's live loading, live unloading, and the timing and the communication that can come down to that method. So you have to create some of those accountability measures because if you're not being accountable as a company with your other drivers, then if they don't do a post trip on a trailer that they dropped, then the next person that gets there to pick it up could be the one, going through a headache in their business day because you're not being accountable through and through as a company, right? So there are trade-offs to being able to run harder as a driver. And I think our drivers love that they have way higher earnings potential than what the standard pay scales are for like regular detention that can keep moving down the road because of our trailer pools. But with that comes a lot of internal management, that can be tough. It's different. It's different than what a lot of people are used to.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for people that may want to try that methodology?
I would say, you got to make sure that your tech stack, is correct. I mean, one of the best investments we ever made was trailer tracking, through a different telematics and ELD provider than what we were with, in the 2010s and the 2019, all the way up until COVID. That is one of the best investments you could ever make if you want to do drop trailers versus having to do manual yard checks, is make sure that you're choosing a really good trailer tracking and telematics provider that has a really robust system that can provide that type of stuff in real time versus, again, those manual yard checks that you're having to have a driver go get eyes on the load, see if it's empty, etc. Those different sensor suites and all that come into play when you're talking. Of the nearly 500 employees we have, about 100 are admin, and really we run 400 tractors with about 30 dispatchers. So when you break that down, every dispatcher is responsible for about 60 trailers apiece, which is pretty efficient. One dispatcher can help move that many loads and keep up with that. There's no way we'd be able to do it without having a really good telematics provider.
Well, now I'm curious. I've actually heard you on another podcast talk about how you are into the logistics tech scene and excited about it. And I know you guys are tech forward as a company. And so I'm wondering if you feel comfortable sharing which technologies you're most excited about right now and which ones you've had success with
Yeah.
at Stevens Trucking.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the big ones is Motive. That is our, trailer tracking, telematics, and ELD provider. They have been excellent. We were with them back when they were Keep Trucking before they made the brand switch to Motive and really exploded because of that trailer tracking methodology. So speaking candidly, someone else in the space wasn't there with the trailer tracking. And because we're different with, 4.5 to 1 trailer to tractor ratio, that's why we chose them when they were Keep Trucking. I think that was back in 2020 or 20, maybe really early 21, right in the middle of COVID. And so I would say that's one of the most crucial business decisions that we made and one of the biggest return on investments that we've had as a company. And then, I mean, there's lots of things, right? We use 10th Street, which acquired Text Locate for communication to drivers. So you're talking about the end-to-end suite of managing the driver recruitment, the driver profiles, all those different types of things, getting some of those processes automated, but still keeping up with the human element of communication and allowing our dispatchers, to be incredibly efficient. We utilize Optimal Dynamics as our fleet optimization tool, and we do a lot of load aggregation and load sourcing through their platform. There's a whole suite of really good tech companies out there, and some of those key partners have been excellent in keeping our trajectory moving forward. And then obviously like which trucks and trailers too, because again, people don't think of them as technology all the time, but like a lot of them have smart trailer technology, smart truck technology, the different safety tech that's out there for them. That's a huge piece. I would say if someone was trying to start, if they were starting a trucking company today, you're going to want to have all that because you're going to keep your insurance premiums much lower, right? And insurance companies are really starting to look at that sort of thing, right? They're digging in, getting granular. What's your tire program look like? Again, do you have, lane departure mitigation systems, front end collision mitigation systems, right? All these different things that if you have your penny pinching hat on can be like, well, that's a cost, right? But you get that return on investment too with A, the safety of your driver force, but B, keeping insurance low because you're having less crashes, you're having less accidents once you start scaling up to a company of size.
Yeah. Oh, that's really helpful. That's a question that I get often because I like to help the community at Alvys and try to stay connected with our customers. And I
Yeah.
like to ask them, what's like the bigger questions you have? What are you wondering about? What do you wish you had insight on? And that's one of the most common questions is like, what tech should I be using? What really is the best tech out there? So
Yeah.
that's helpful info. And I might ask you a little bit more about that, after this podcast, because I'd love to hear even more.
Yeah.
And you guys chose Alvys for your TMS.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, why you chose Alvys and which problems you were looking to solve there.
All of our core data problems, right? A lot of legacy TMSs don't play nice in the space. So we're super pumped about our partnership with Alvys because again, getting those core data functions and having something that is a lot more plug and play than a lot of the other systems out there. That's why we're super excited about, what Alvys can do for us as a company, especially as a hybrid company. It's one of those things where everyone has their expertise and maybe they focus more on warehouse management or they're more shipper related as a TMS structure, or they focus carrier only or broker only. But the way that we operate, that's why we've been so excited about the partnership and moving forward with Alvys is we can utilize a bit of everything and it fits our hybrid model to where you're cutting down some of the communication amongst different segments of our business as we continue to scale versus, just manual communications, spreadsheets, right? All the things, because if you're a quicker moving company, and also I will give credit to Alvis's entire executive team with like how well they handle partnerships too. That is so important because you can get into a space where working with people versus them being a competitor can be a very fine line, right? And as you grow in logistics, in my seat as an employer as really kind of trying to grow the company into a full logistics company, not just a trucking company, that we deal with that every day too, right? You're technically competing maybe with a broker because now you have a brokerage arm, but also that broker is your customer, right? So there's that, there's that line that you have to walk. And I'll say, like, Alvys has been excellent about being open to the current tech stack that we have, and like being very, very interested in our partnerships that we already share, even if there's stuff that's being worked on that you could look at as competition, right? And that's because it's such a big sandbox. There's so much data, there's so much speed and logistics and supply chain that, like, I'm a huge believer that we should all play nice in that sandbox because it's so vast. I tell people that are not in the space, largest truckload carrier out there is 35,000 trucks. That's 1% of the entirety of the driver force market of 3.5 million American drivers. So most other spaces are more in the 7 to 10% space for market share. If you get into e-commerce, if you get into, technology with an Apple, right? So there's so much fragmentation. That's how we've always carried ourselves as a company. And that's why it's a breath of fresh air to, deal with the PMAX. So shout out to him at Alvys, right? With like how you guys handle your business and the fact that it's like, hey, we're all trying to solve this thing together. It's called supply chain for a reason. It's just a bunch of links in the supply chain trying to figure things out and how we can band together versus, oh no, the old school way, I would say, of just don't come get in my sandbox, right? This is my sandbox. These are my customers. And it's like, well, if you open yourself up and provide creative solutions to those customers, they'll stay with you forever. Right. So
Yeah.
I know that's a lot, but it's not just about the core data side, right? That's huge, but it's the scalability, it's the customization, it's the relationships to inside the business, because I feel like it's like fingerprints and snowflakes. I feel like there's no one identity of a company that's the same. Like if you get past probably 5 trucks, there's hardly anyone that you could go say, what kind of truck do you buy? What kind of trailer do you buy? Who's your core TMS? Who do you use for your safety tech? Who do you use for your telematics, right? And almost every single one, I feel like in the industry would have a different combination. And there's probably hardly any 2 companies that are the same. So when you think about that, it's like, okay, we've got to be flexible. We can't just tie ourselves to one vendor here, right? Between hardware and software that is just going to solve all my problems for me. If they do, tell me who it is, Ava, and I'll try to invest every penny that I have, because they'll be incredibly wealthy someday. But it's again, it's a big sandbox.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes you got to experiment. It sounds like with Alvys, the things that stood out to you were it's open API architecture. So you can kind of build onto it, and it's made for hybrid companies. It works very well for hybrid companies. I call them hybrids. I don't know what you call them. Carriers that also have a brokerage arm.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So you guys started in oil field Hotshots and then moved into dry van. Do you guys have a sweet spot of the kind of freight that you move today?
Yeah, I mean, obviously your bulk commodities, some automotive, different paper products, right? So things that, can be recycled, corrugate, a lot of boxes and different things that maybe take a little bit longer to load or unload, because a lot of the time when you get into the warehousing space, pallets, those different types of things, like they don't just have a run of pallets and they also don't want to take up their warehouse space. So, they may preload those over a week's time onto a trailer, or when you ship boxes into like a distribution center, they're going to unload that as they load the product. So that creates a lot of trailer dwell. Same thing, a lot of things that go onto automotive lines. We obviously do your normal retail, food and beverage, all of the normal truckload things. But when it comes to the drop and hook method and requiring that ratio of trailer to tractor, you really have to think about what commodity that you're talking about and be very realistic as to what shipper and receiver that you're dealing with and what the realistic dwell time, could be, so that you're planning on how much equipment, so that when you price it right. And, you're not thinking that load of boxes is going to get unloaded as soon as we get there within a couple hours. No, it's going to be a few days, probably 5 on average, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. So Before we get to our very last question, wanted to ask you, like, what's the best way to stay in contact with Stevens Trucking or to follow you guys and what you're up to?
Yeah, so my brother does all the driver recruiting and different stuff. So we've got all the Facebook pages and everything. You can always just come by. We're in, Oklahoma City. Just won a world title in basketball, which was pretty sweet. Because I've been a Thunder fan my whole life. So, if anybody wants to come, try to hang out with SGA or something, more than happy. Just come by the terminal. Who needs a phone call when you can come see us in Oklahoma, right? Um, we got all the social media stuff, email, anything. I'm pretty open and try to be very accessible. So, if anybody's watching or listening, just reach out. There's more than one way to get a hold of us.
Right on. And you never mentioned what sport you played in college.
I was a baseball player. So
Baseball.
I was a baseball player. My shoulders do not thank me anymore. Man, I've hurt everything you could ever imagine hurting. So my shoulders. And what's funny, my director of sales played with me in college. So he's been with me, run the brokerage arm for 6 years. I was a righty and he was a lefty pitcher. So we sometimes tell war stories and just complain and moan about how bad our shoulders hurt all the time. So
That's the way you guys bond,
yeah,
fellow shoulder pain.
yeah, with ice packs on our shoulders these days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Last question.
Yeah.
If you were to talk to younger Cole, graduating college, looking to work in Stevens Trucking, what kind of advice would you give yourself starting out in this industry?
Gosh, that's a loaded question, Ava. That's a great question. You know, uh, sense of urgency, right? Like, that's huge in the logistics space. So just you have to be on when you're here, but also like don't burn yourself out, right? Kind of back to the sandbox and like how you play with customers and vendors. The same thing, it's 24/7. So there's always time to do things and there will always be something to do. That's what's like, it's nice about the industry, but also too, you can't lose sight of like who you are. So I would say, it sounds corny, but like, balance, right? It's balance. We don't do everything we do for one customer. So, you diversify your portfolio. You should diversify your time that you spend. Sometimes it's time to sprint. Sometimes it's time to jog with your time, with your energy. The customer demand is always a sprint because every load is always the most important thing, right? People demand almost perfection in this business, right? I was raised, Ava, on like a 90% or more was an A, but everybody is a 98% or more on time, right? That's pretty industry standard. So I would say with that customer demand is when you're here, demand perfection, but also don't ever forget to like go recharge the jets, be a good mother, good father, good husband, good wife. If you're in the industry, enjoy time with your spouse or your children, go do your hobbies, turn it off every once in a while because it will always, always be here. And that's something that took me a little while early in my career because I was 22 when I started, right? And it was just like, I'll keep running through a wall all the time. And I had to learn how to keep my mind fresh and keep that up for the customer side, but also realize that like we're just people and we can't be up here 24/7, 365, even though the industry moves that way. And so learn how to balance your time and energy.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's good advice for anybody. You know what I mean? And I admire how you get to work with your friends, people that you played sports with in college, and also your family members. And like in my mind, that would just make working so much more fun every day to have that community. It's like not just a workplace, it's also your community. And it sounds like you guys are fabulous at building exactly that. And it has made you, that top 10 workplace in Oklahoma, which I've never heard that before personally from a trucking company. I think that's really cool. And I really enjoyed learning that about you guys. So Cole, yeah, thank you so much for sharing your story and your time with us, from humble roots to top 10 workplace, 400 trucks and counting. Awesome drop and hook service. Yeah. And to everybody else,
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Ava.
yeah. And to everybody else, thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed the episode, please rate, review, share, and we'll catch you next time on the Freight People podcast.